It's time for the podcast. Yeah, the podcast is starting.
What's a podcast?
It's all gonna be alright in the end. It's gonna be alright. And if you've got some worries, my dear little friends, please rest your busy minds, because it's finally time for stories from now and then.
Hey kids, welcome back to Stories from Now and Then. My name is Captain Blunderface. And I'm here with Deprecatus up in the old treehouse. Last time we were up here, I think we were talking about Robin Hood. Okay? And this is the treehouse behind the old library. So we don't come up here very often. So we can see through this window into the old library tower window up there. And if we look below, we can see the craft room through the big double windows. Yes, Deprecatus, I see those people. They're bringing in some of the new books. So they'll be done in about 2 hours, and then we can head back in. It's just a cool view looking from here. Same stuff, but you got a different angle, right? Oh, it's a little blurry for you? Well, you might be nearsighted, I think. But at least you can see in the dark 10 times better than me. No, I'm not getting sidetracked. I find it interesting. And I care about you. I care about your ocular experiences. Before we climb into today's true story, we have a shout out from Diana and Clara in Galveston, Texas. Diana and Clara are both very clever and very brave girls, and today's episode is dedicated to you and your little brother Pierce. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. And with that, we'll pass it off to Nicola for today's story.
We've got another true story for you today. This story is very special because it only happened about 30 years ago, when I was a little girl. This story is about a wonderful woman with a very special name. She was called Julia Butterfly Hill. Now, Julia grew up traveling all around America with her family. Her father was a preacher who moved from town to town, sharing his faith and helping people. Julia saw mountains and deserts, big cities and small villages, forests and prairies. She grew to love nature and being outside, just enjoying the way the sun shone through the leaves of trees, the way rivers gurgled and flowed, and the way the birds sang their songs to each other in the morning. When Julia was in her early 20s, something happened that changed her life completely. She was in a car accident, a terrible, scary crash that hurt her very badly. For months afterward, Julia couldn't walk properly anymore. She couldn't think clearly anymore. Her whole world had been shaken up like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and she didn't know how to put the pieces back together. But slowly and gradually, Julia healed. And as she healed, she started thinking about what really mattered in life. What was important? What did she want to do with her life? I want to help, Julia thought. I want to make the world better somehow. One day, Julia went on a trip to Northern California, to a magical place called Humboldt County, where the tallest trees in the world grow. These trees are called coast redwoods, or if you are a scientist, you might call them by their Latin name, Sequoia sempervirens. Coast redwoods are so tall that you have to lean back to see the tops of them, and they're so old that they were alive when castles were being built in faraway lands. Walking around them and looking up, Julia felt so small compared to these ancient giants. But Julia learned these magnificent trees were being cut down. companies with huge chainsaws and giant machines were chopping them down to make lumber, wood for building houses and making paper. "But these trees have been here for over 1,000 years," Julia said, shocked. "Some of them are 2,000 years old." "Doesn't matter," said the logging companies. "We own the land, we need the wood. Down they come." Julia met other people who were trying to save the trees. They had tried talking to the companies, tried everything they could think of. Nothing was working. The chainsaws would keep cutting down both old and new trees, one after another, crashing to the ground with a huge crack and an earth-shaking boom. Then someone had an unusual idea. A brave, bold, slightly crazy idea. What if someone climbed up into one of the trees and stayed there? They said. The logging company can't cut down a tree with a person in it. Julia heard this idea, and something in her heart said, "Yes, I'll do it." "Are you sure?" her friends asked. "It's dangerous. It's uncomfortable. You'll be cold and wet and lonely." "I'm sure," said Julia. On December 10th, 1997, Julia climbed up into a giant coast redwood tree. The tree was 200 feet tall. That's as tall as a 20-story building, and about 1,500 years old. They had named this special tree Luna. Julia climbed and climbed all the way up to a platform she and her friends had prepared, about 180 feet off the ground. The platform was small, just 6 feet by 6 feet, about the size of a large bathroom. It had a tarp for a roof to keep off the rain, and that was about it. "I'll stay for a few weeks," Julia thought, "just until the logging company agrees to save Luna and the trees around her." But those few weeks turned into months, and those months turned into more than 2 years. Imagine sleeping 180 feet in the air on a tiny platform, swaying back and forth in the wind, always wearing a safety rope to catch you if you slip. Julia slept in a sleeping bag wrapped tight against the cold. Sometimes the wind was so strong the whole tree would sway like a bendy rod, back and forth. Imagine being cold and wet for hours and days. Northern California gets lots of rain, and everything was damp. Her clothes, her sleeping bag, her books. Her hands went all white and wrinkly from being wet for so long, and her fingers hurt from the cold. Julia's friends on the ground would send up supplies using a pulley system with ropes and wheels, sending food, water, fresh clothes and books to read. They would call up to her through a 2-way radio, like a walkie-talkie, keeping her company with their voices when they couldn't be there in person. Julia would also talk to Luna, which might sound silly, but when you're alone in a tree for months, talking to trees seems perfectly reasonable. Trees can't talk back with voices, but they are alive after all. And every day, Luna the tree stood strong and kept Julia safe. From her platform, Julia watched the seasons change around her. She saw winter turn to spring. She watched the birds build their nests, watched the babies learn to fly. She watched squirrels chase each other along the branches. But she could also hear chainsaws buzzing in the distance. Bzzz, crash, boom. As other trees fell, she could see the bare patches in the forest where ancient giants had stood the day before. The logging company wasn't happy. They flew helicopters near the tree, hoping the noise and the wind would scare her. Julia just held on tight and stayed put. They shone bright lights at her platform all night long, trying to not let her sleep. Julia just covered her eyes and stayed put. They even cut down trees near Luna, hoping that Julia would feel unsafe. "I won't let Luna fall," she said firmly. "I won't give up." Winter came again. The first winter had been hard, but this second winter was brutal. Storms rolled in with strong winds, rain fell in sheets, and the temperature dropped below freezing. One storm was so fierce that Julia thought Luna might break apart or fall over. The wind howled and screamed, and ice formed on the branches, making them heavy and dangerous. Julia huddled on her tiny platform, soaking wet, freezing cold, terrified. "Please, Luna," she whispered to the tree. "Please keep standing. Please don't break." Luna creaked and groaned and swayed, but she held firm. She protected Julia through that terrible night, and when morning came and the storm had passed, both Julia and Luna were still standing. Julia had been in the tree for over a year now. The world was starting to pay attention. Newspapers wrote stories about her. TV reporters climbed up to interview her. The logging company began to realize something. Julia wasn't going to give up. And the longer she stayed, the more people started asking, should we really be cutting down 1,500-year-old trees? Aren't there other ways to get the materials we need? Finally, after 738 days, after more than 2 years of living on that small platform, the logging company agreed to negotiate. They would make a deal with Julia. They agreed to save Luna and all the trees within 200 feet around her. On December 18th, 1999, exactly 738 days after she'd climbed up, Julia climbed down. Her legs were wobbly from not walking on solid ground for so long. Her muscles were weak, but her heart was full and strong. Julia's tree sit became famous around the world, and Luna still stands today, tall and proud in Humboldt County. She has a small plaque near her base that tells Julia's story. People visit her, touch her bark, look up into her branches, and remember the young woman who loved this tree enough to live in her for 2 years. If there's anything we can learn from Julia Butterfly Hill, it's to think about what's important to us and what we can do about that. Julia had so much love for those trees, but her love didn't mean that she had to do lots of complicated things. Sometimes the best way we can love is to do very simple things and do them with lots and lots of courage. And perhaps one day I'll be reading the story of your adventures and all the wonderful things you've done.
Thanks, Nicola, for that amazing story. I agree. I bet there are incredible adventures happening right now. or maybe tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, and we want to hear about your adventures. So I'll tell you how to do that in a bit. Deprecatus really enjoyed that story too. He was telling me that he is great at climbing up trees, but he really needs a cat slide to get down, and tree cat slides are either prohibitively expensive or have very long shipping times. If you'd like to have a shout out and an episode dedicated to you, just send us a DM on Instagram at Stories From Now and Then. We'd love to hear from you. Stories From Now and Then is narrated by Nicola Ward, Captain Blunderface played by Evan Wiebe, and the music, well, the music. So I can actually tell you where this came from. So it came about because Captain Blunderface was actually going on a walk one day, and a melody fell from the sky and straight into his brain like a lightning bolt.
Stories from now and then.